And now I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Executive Director of NRPSI, the UK's independent voluntary regulator of professional interpreters specialising in public service. He'll speak on the importance of the professional code of conduct and quality control. A very warm welcome to Mike Orlov. Mike, it's great to have you.
Jamila, thank you very much, and thank you for holding us together through this session and keeping us on track. Not an easy job, it's live theatre. And a very special thank you to MD and Deltic for organising today and getting us together to be able to share. There have been some amazing presentations, glorious celebrations of languages, and more so, glorious celebrations of that relationship between an individual and their mother. I'm going to touch on that a little bit as we move on. Now, let's test if we can, technology, and is it working for us? Can you all see these slides? Yes?
Yes, we can.
That is marvellous. It's good to know technology is working for us. I'm actually remarkably proud to be the offspring, a first-generation immigrant. And as Abir so beautifully put it, the vitality of a mother, and the bedrock that a mother is. And absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, the reason that I'm in this current role is because as a small child, I watched my parents as immigrants in this country struggle with communicating and attempting to access the public services. I remember that so clearly as a small child. And given the work that I've done in my previous life, because I am 176 years old, that I've actually worked in the Gulf Cooperation Council, I've worked in Southeast Asia, I've worked in many parts of the world. And I've personally experienced the difficulty of accessing public services when I don't speak the language. So now, in the time that we've got together, we're going to gallop through a really rapid look at the community of regulated and registered public service interpreters in the UK. We're going to explore why being a professional practitioner and being recognised and accredited as such is important. And indeed, support for self-care. I will be honest and say that for the last 34 years, I've been married to a lady who is a psychotherapist, who lives and breathes helping those who've been impacted by vicarious trauma. And in the role I'm in now, working alongside professional practitioners who are public service interpreters, we can see the need for self-care and how belonging to a community of professionals absolutely matters. But it's more than just that. The real work of the National Register revolves around protection of the public. So let's move on. And let's just focus on the fact that we know that the majority of those individuals who are registered and regulated by the National Register of Public Service Interpreters, they're actually very proud to carry that name and that badge. This is one of the directors of NRPSI, and he's so focused on the need for us to ensure that professionalism is registered, that professionalism is recognised, and that actually the public services operate in a safe environment. Many of you will know that only just in the last fortnight, there's been a horrible admission that a death was caused due to very poor interpreting in the National Health in Gloucester not that long ago. Unless we have accredited and registered and regulated public service interpreters who are qualified and capable and experienced, we put the public at risk. So our subject today, what is NRPSI, or NRPSI as it's known by many? And then what is a registrant of NRPSI? What are the qualifications and experience needed to be one of those registrants, and understand a little bit about the code of professional conduct and the resources and the tools that are available to somebody who's proud to be a NRPSI registrant. Well, first thing, let's just understand what it isn't. It isn't an agency. Its role is not to find work for registrants. There are outsourcing agencies that are exceptionally good at this work, and that is not the role of the NRPSI, nor is it a union. There are unions that act on behalf of their members. There is indeed a union for people who are public service interpreters, called NUPIT, and NRPSI is not a union. Now, according to the Professional Association Research Network, there are approximately 400 professional bodies in the UK, which actually represent something like 13 million different professionals. These professionals could well be members of an association, where associations work on behalf of their members. And indeed, for public service interpreting, there are associations, and it's very easy to join them. All you need to do is have the right qualifications, the right experience, and then those associations will act on your behalf as a member. There are then the learned institutes and the societies for members. Learned institutes working on behalf of broader based professions and driving forward how those professions begin to operate and can develop. The National Register is not one of those either. There are learned institutes within our ecosystem, but the National Register is not a learned institute. It is a regulatory body with registrants who qualify. And the role of the regulatory body is different to that of a learned institute, which is focused on the profession and on the members of the institute. The role of a regulatory body is different to that of an association, which is focused on its members. The role of a regulatory body is to protect the public. And as Phil Muriel, one of the practitioner board members, has said, both our goal and our main challenge is to get our profession properly recognized. That's the profession of public service interpreters, which includes the protection of title to ensure that that actually stands for something. Means that only registered and regulated professionals would be able to call themselves a public service interpreter. You know, without this, the public is not protected. And if the public isn't protected, then we have miscarriages of justice and we have misdiagnoses. People die and people get sent down when they shouldn't get sent down. So what is a registered public service interpreter, an RPSI? Well, linguist is a catch-all term for people involved in the world of languages. Every registered public service interpreter is definitely a linguist, but not all linguists should be working in the public sector as interpreters. Language academics, professors, people with master's degrees, people studying for doctorates, unless they have the relevant vocational qualifications and the experience, then they should not be putting themselves forward to work in courts or indeed in the NHS or other public sector organisations. Commercial translators, commercial and conference interpreters, do they have the right qualifications to act as a registered public service interpreter? Some of them do. Some of them have said, actually, I don't just want to be a conference interpreter. I also want to work in the public sector. I want to be a language services specialist. So they gain their relevant vocational qualification, their experiences, and are regulated and registered public service interpreters. Indeed, Amina, we had a presentation from one earlier today. She does a great deal of conference work and commercial work, but she also does a lot of work in the public sector, and she has the right qualifications and the right experience, and she's also regulated and registered by the National Register. And indeed, in the future, there will be registered public service translators as well. So becoming a registrant, what do you need to do? Well, full status, you need a level 6, which is a degree level qualification, plus 400 hours of verifiable and verified experience. If you've gained the qualification, a DPSI level 6 or an equivalent, but you haven't got the experience, you can join the National Register as a registrant on interim A status. If you're very experienced, having done a great deal of work in the public sector, and you've shown that you are committed to getting the qualification, the vocational qualification, and you have a module in interpreting and a module in translation, so that's 2 out of the 5 modules for a DPSI, then you can join as interim B, where you've got the experience, but you're gaining the qualification. And then, of course, there's the category of rare languages. We touched on this already. And the National Register is very good at this, ensuring that there is an opportunity for those where there isn't a vocational qualification, but there's a pathway to actually act as a professional public service interpreter. There are protocols laid down, and Sileti is indeed a language that's very important on the National Register. There's no minimum age. Other than at 18 years, you've got to have acceptable qualifications. So it's interesting. We have a 19-year-old who has got the vocational qualifications and has managed to get the 400 hours of experience. It's a 19-year-old who is a full status registrant on NRPSI. Maximum age, no limit. You've got to be physically capable. If you've got to travel and be working and there in a court, you've got to travel and actually at 2 a.m. in the morning be in a police custody suite. You've got to be fit enough to do the work. Oldest registrant on the National Register, 93 years of age and still working and still trusted by the public sector organisations for which she's proven herself over very, very many years. You've got to be eligible to work in the UK, so identity check's important. You have to have valid security clearances. So once you've got the qualification and the 400 hours and you are full status, then you have to agree to abide by the Code of Professional Conduct. Now, this is vital. The Code of Professional Conduct is hugely important. As Madeline Lee, who's another practitioner board director, who's a registered Dutch interpreter, said, being registered and regulated entails being skilled to a very high professional standard and complying with a Code of Professional Conduct. And through that, respecting the associated disciplinary procedures. This is what marks people out as a professional. When they have a code, an ethical center around which they will operate. And the Code of Professional Conduct is one of the key platforms for people who are proud to be NRPSI regulated. Are they certified? Are their qualifications in place? Is their experience in place? Do they have the security vetting? And do they adhere to the code? There's a professional conduct committee staffed by professionals who work in the world of professional conduct. There's a disciplinary committee. If things move that far, this is headed actually by a judge. And there are magistrates and there are barristers who are on the panel who will work with individuals if something gets as far as a disciplinary hearing, with, of course, an appeals committee. Now, the purpose of this is to protect the public. If things go wrong, if there's an evidenced complaint, public is first. We must protect the public. And indeed, through this, we protect the public service. Had the National Health recently ensured that he was a registered and regulated public service interpreter who was carrying out the interpreting in Gloucester, then it's almost certain that that individual would not have died, that the interpreting would not have gone wrong, and indeed the public service would have been protected. More than all that, it also protects you as an individual, you as the registered public service interpreter. because if there's a complaint which is hearsay, it will be dismissed. If there's a complaint where the evidence is actually not proven, then the complaint is dismissed. So as a registered public service interpreter, you also get the protection of the Code of Professional Conduct. It protects you, it protects the profession, it protects the public service, most importantly, protects the public. So what are the goals of NRPSI, of NRPSI? Well, secure protection of title for public service language professionals. It is a young profession. You know, if you think about nursing, that the first Code of Professional Conduct written for nursing was in the 1850s by Florence Nightingale in Scutari in Bulgaria and during the Crimean War. 1850s. It wasn't until 1919 that nurses had protection of title and became state registered nurses. It took 70 years. Lobby for statutory regulation for public service language professionals. We've already just touched on the things that can go wrong. We absolutely need statutory regulation to make sure that the profession is protected, the professionals are protected, and that the public are protected. Lobbying to obtain appropriate remuneration. Ensure the terms and the conditions are commensurate with the qualifications and experience of registered regulated practitioners. It's wrong for professionals not to earn commensurate with their qualifications and experience, and the National Register lobbies very hard on this. Establishing the register for translators and growing the register for interpreters. Our goals are also to build on our regular conversations with the registrants. We are regularly in touch and we have a very big ear to listen to their needs and their demands. And through increasing our effective use of social media and other media platforms is communicate the message that those individuals who are professional at interpreting in foreign languages within the UK truly are individuals that should be respected and their status should be recognized. And so we work very hard at using media platforms to get the message across about how important public service interpreting is in the United Kingdom. Becoming active across all areas of public service interpreting and translation, matching levels of attainment to the complexity of work. It's so true that there are different levels of complexity out there demanding different levels of qualifications and experience, and the National Register is recognizing this and working very clearly and very obviously with partners to ensure that professionalism is recognized through all the tiers of operations for public service interpreting within the UK. And we will continue effective dialogue with public sector organisations, with the police, with the Ministry of Justice, with the NHS. And through that, develop dialogue with the executive and legislative functions across the UK. Sometimes government can have a deaf ear. Other times government can really listen. When it becomes politically expedient, we need to ensure we are there at the time when the politicians recognise the need to make changes. So, a little bit of history. National Register was launched in 1994, launched at the behest of the judiciary that called it into being following a royal commission that recommended the establishment of a register of public service interpreters so that only trained and qualified interpreters can operate in the public sector, clearly governed by the Code of Professional Conduct that we've just talked about. It was established by what was then the Institute of Linguists, now the Chartered Institute of Linguists, and became independent as a not-for-profit organisation in 2011. Our core activities remain what they've always been, which is to ensure the public are protected, which is to ensure practitioners are protected, which is to ensure the highest level of qualification, experience, recognition of status of the individuals who are safe to do the work of a public service interpreter, and to extend this, as of now, into the world of public service translating. So it's really important to focus on the fact that there's a very high number of people who have poor English skills in the United Kingdom. And by statute, all public sector organisations have to ensure there is no hindrance to any resident of the UK accessing public services. Not speaking English is a hindrance. And the UK is recognising the fact that you have to have somebody there as an interpreter. What's really concerning is that actually within the UK right now, it's still not mandatory to only engage with registered and regulated public service interpreters. There's still a lot of people arriving in the UK who do not speak English. And these work-related visas are being extended. They're being pushed out to people right now. We're actually seeing more now in 2023 than we saw in 2020, pre-pandemic. So this is not going to change. There's going to be a growing number of people in the United Kingdom who do not have English as their mother tongue, that have a different mother tongue, and their English is not proficient. And when these individuals either are a witness to a crime, either they are a victim of a crime, either they've been accused, or they need to have a life concerning dialogue with a doctor or with another medico, it's vital that the interpreter in the room is somebody who is regulated, registered, qualified, and experienced. There is an absolute continuing need for professionalism in public service interpreting. As Lalia, who is our retiring practitioner director, who's been with the National Register now for 11 years, she's been another rock as far as the development of NRPSI says. Our qualifications and accountability as professionals is what separates us from those who are working as interpreters who are not qualified and not accountable. If you're working as an interpreter in the public sector, be accountable. Show that you've got the qualifications, show that you've got the experience, and adhere to the Code of Professional Conduct from the organisation, which is a not-for-profit, which was set up nearly 30 years ago to look after you and to watch over the public. The profession of public service interpreting has a need to minimise, diminish and alleviate risk through protection of the public, setting, maintaining, developing and promoting standards, confirming relevant vocational qualifications, accrediting competencies, measuring the degrees of competence, proportionate, accountable, consistent, transparent, targeted, capped measures of fitness to practice, protecting the qualifying professional practitioners, that'll be you, promoting the Code of Professional Conduct, ensuring there's impartiality through the Professional Conduct Committee, the Disciplinary Committee, the appeals process. Remember, that's there to protect the public, but it's also there to protect the practitioner, and lobbying for protection of title for professional practitioners into the future, supporting the regulator and the register of professionals, and ensuring the visibility of accredited registered public service interpreters as professional practitioners. So there's a gallop through what the National Register does. In essence, it's basically saying interpreting is not a job from which you can just earn a few bob. It's a profession, and if it's that, then be a professional and carry out the work professionally. As a public service interpreter, you're handling complex relationships with really major outcomes if we get it wrong. If we get it right, the major outcome is positive. If we get it wrong, the major outcome is negative. Focusing on public service interpreting responsibilities. Yes, you've got your own interests as an individual. You've got responsibilities to perhaps an association or an institute that you're a member of. You have a responsibility to the public, the people that you're working alongside. Then there's the public sector itself, the general management and the procurement team. Sometimes they are painful to deal with, but we as professionals have a responsibility to manage our relationship with them and those operating in and around engagements, barristers, solicitors, judges in the courts, the police that you work with, the doctors and the nurses and the allied health professionals that you work with. Any commercial agencies involved, we have an absolute responsibility to any arrangement that you make, you must fulfill that arrangement. The profession of public service interpreting as well as the standing of your regulator, NRPSI. As our chair says, we want NRPSI and our registrants to be recognised and accepted as the definitive mark of quality in public service interpreting. There are lots of marketing materials that are available, which as a public service interpreter you can make use of. And again, Amina is very good at this too, as are very many NRPSI registrants. There was a time when being an interpreter, there was no regulation, it's only an occupation. There was a time when limited regulation was around, it's a nascent, it was a budding profession. That's nearly 30 years ago. Public interest merits much greater regulation. There's now undoubtedly self-regulation. And indeed, there are some parts of the public sector where it's mandatory that if you want to work there as an interpreter, you have to be a registrant on the National Register. Statutory regulation is coming. If there is an inexorable inevitability to protection of title for this profession. Making a wall badly means the wall will fall. Not anybody can do this work. Not anybody can be an interpreter in the public sector. And with this presentation, there's a whole series of links that you can have. This presentation will be available on the NRPSI website as of tomorrow morning. You'll be able to find it on the news pages, and MD will also have a PDF copy that he can send out to people who want it as well. So thank you very much for your time. It was a very rapid gallop through. I hope I've not gone too far over time. Yes, indeed, registrants are proud to be NRPSI, and they're right to be proud of NRPSI because they're working as regulated and registered professionals there to protect the public, to ensure the public, those who need a voice, get a voice. And hopefully next year we can talk a little bit more about the National Register of Public Service Translators. So thank you very much. I am now going to stop sharing screen and hand back to Samina. Thank you, Samina.
Mike, thank you so much for sharing details of NRPSI and the role and importance of a regulator. That was really comprehensive. And no, you didn't speak too fast or rush. That was just perfect. And also, may I add that Councillor Sultan earlier rightly thanked NRPSI for listing his mother tongue, Sylheti, as a separate language and helping to save lives and ensuring fair trial and justice. And I'd also like to add that LC managers are also full members of NRPSI, and LC is committed to cooperate to achieve the goals of NRPSI. And also, Mike, we've got a message in. Let me just read it out to you. It's from Bibiana. She says, amazing to hear from Mike flying our NRPSI flag. Regards to all at LC, from Bibiana. So that's really nice. So thank you, Bibiana, for sending that message through. Now,